So here I am. The lighting is terrible, and I have to do, I think it's 9 videos in a row on a blustery Sunday Sunday afternoon. Um, yeah, I just think it's kind of funny. Here I am, 9 in a row, looking like something that the cat dragged in. So I was not only struggling with my health, but at the same time, I had a lot of work obligations. I had a whole week of work obligations that kept me on the road and away from my home and my own bed, and I was all over the province. And I knew I was going to be exhausted, and so I had been saving this book. It is the last book in the trilogy. I'm not. Here's the thing about me. I don't mind a historical fiction. In fact, I quite enjoy them, but they have to be really well done. And I find a lot of historical fiction is kind of schlocky, and it's almost like bad romance novels. And I do not do romance novels. This is not my thing. Um, so when I picked up the first book, The Many Lives and Secret Sorrows of Josephine B., I did not realize that that was the first book in a trilogy. And I'm kind of glad I didn't realize that, because I think if I had realized that, I would have never bothered buying it. Um, so I picked it up and I kind of thought, oh, this is going to be one of those, like, whatever. You kind of filler books, you're just kind of in between something good. And I got so sucked into that book. It was amazing. I think I read that book in like what it was one weekend. It wasn't even a full weekend. It was just like, I think it was a Saturday and then a Sunday morning. Like, I just couldn't put it down. But I remember getting to the last, like, I was 10 pages from the end and realizing this is not the end. There's gonna be, oh no, and sure enough, it was part of a trilogy. Um, and so I looked on at Amazon to look into, like, buying the other two, but it was going to cost me a ridiculous amount of money. Like, after the books and the shipping and everything like that, like, it was going to be like $70 for 2 books or something. It was silly. Mm. And so I just didn't. I just left it, and I figured, well, I'll figure it out at some point later on. And then this summer, Um, I paddled the Rideau Canal, all 220 kilometers of it, and I happened to paddle into Perth for a day. Which, what a lovely community. I definitely would love to paddle into there again. Um, and I stumbled on a bookstore in Perth called, oh, I had a bookmark, but oh, here's the bookmark from it, called The Bookworm. It's on 76 Foster Street in Perth, Ontario. So if you happen to be there, you should go. It's a lovely, lovely bookstore. And the laundromat is right around the corner. So it was a rainy day, and I thought, well, and I was waiting for my laundry, and I just thought, well, I'll bump into the bookstore. I mean, you don't really want to have a whole ton of books when you're paddling around. It's just extra stuff, and books don't do well near water. That's the other problem. So I tended to, I mean, I had a notebook, and then I would have, like, I think I had brought 2 books with me in the boat. And I think I had finished one and I had left it somewhere. I don't know where. So I only had one with me at the time. But there I was in the bookstore, and I found the other two. Just the two. The first one was not with them. So I found just the two. And I read the second one right away. Couldn't wait. It was amazing. Loved it. Um, and that one was called Tales of Passion, Tales of Woe. And I believe I had to leave that somewhere because, again, you're in a kayak. When you live in a kayak, you don't have a lot of space. You don't have bookshelves. You don't get to have a library. Um, but I kept this one. I carried this one with me all the way. Like, all the way home. All that that summer. I just thought, oh, it's the last one. I don't want to read it right away. And I was saving it and saving it and saving it. And finally, I thought, like, being sick like I was, and I needed something to try and get me through that horrible week. And this was the thing. I promised myself if I could just make it through the week, then that weekend I would get to crawl into bed and just stay in bed and read this book. And it did not disappoint. I have to say, when it comes to trilogies, there aren't many authors who manage to make every subsequent book just as good as the first one. I actually haven't read the whole entire Harry Potter series. I've only read the first one. But my kids really get into the series after I read it to them. So I'm assuming that J.K. Rowling does an excellent job of that. Robertson Davies does a pretty good job of that for me. And I have to say, this is probably one of the few, maybe if only, other authors who manages to do that for me. Every single one of these books was just really engrossing. Like, you just get really sucked into her life. She's very, she's just really well fleshed out. Like, she's not created as a caricature, right? She has her flaws and her foibles, and she's just a woman who is reacting to her times. And what an amazing life. So yeah. And I have to say, I kind of was not, I knew that something happened in the end, that they split up, but I wasn't sure exactly why or how that came about. So that was really fascinating and interesting to me. So yeah, so this is the story of Josephine Bonaparte. And it starts with her as a little girl living in, I think it's Saint Martinique, if I remember correctly, on a plantation there, and how she moves to Europe and marries a count, and then what happens to her and her family during the during the French Revolution, and then how she came to meet Napoleon, and what happened during their marriage, and all of that kind of stuff. It is an amazing read. And if you are someone who likes to get into history through some of the characters, this is definitely a highly recommended. Turns out, just as a little side note, when I was at the bookstore, I was talking to the owner of that bookstore about these books, and I explained to her how I'd been looking for precisely those two books, like the two follow-up ones. And she mentioned to me that this is actually a Canadian author who lives not far from Perth, Ontario. I can't remember exactly where she lives, but if I remember correctly, oh no, I thought this was a signed copy. Maybe the other one was a signed copy, and that was the one I had to give away. Oh, so sad. Anyway, but yeah, so an excellent author, and I was looking online. I think she has a couple other ones, but they are not series. But I'll probably have a look at those as well in the future. But The Last Great Dance on Earth was the last one in the series. Made me sad to say goodbye, to know there are no more for me to read. But yeah, it was a fun ride while it lasted, for sure. I think it was five cups of tea again, 4 cups of tea. I had a pretty good reading month, I gotta say. Happy reading.